Oh my word, was I terrified. I was like thrown into this room full of what I deemed to be grown-ups in suits and given a name badge and just expected to know how to talk to them. In academia especially, I think there's this sense of, unless I have all the answers, I shouldn't be in the room. And that's literally the opposite of what networking is for. Like, the reason to go networking is to learn.
Hello there, I'm Sarah McCluskey and this is Research Adjacent. Each episode I talk to amazing research adjacent professionals about what they do and why it makes a difference. Keep listening to find out why we think the research adjacent space is where the real magic happens. Hello and welcome to Research Adjacent episode 56. I'm your host Sarah McCluskey, and coming up today I have a brilliant conversation with networking expert Jeni Smith. Now, you might already be wondering why Jeni qualifies as research adjacent. Well, it's because she specialises in helping researchers, including academics and students, to develop their networks and their networking skills. Through her company NetKno, she delivers talks and workshops as well as one-to-one support. A natural connector, Jeni has been working in networking in some way, shape or form for 15 years and is so obsessed with it that she is even doing a part-time PhD on, you guessed it, networking. We talk about why business folks and academics network for different reasons, overcoming common barriers to networking, and why most people have the wrong idea about what networking is for. Oh, and then there's also the fact that she is responsible for at least one marriage and 3 children. Listen on to hear Jeni's story. Welcome along to the podcast, Jeni. Thank you so much for coming along and joining us today. Could we begin by hearing a little bit about what it is that you do?
Yeah, hi, thanks for having me, Sarah. So my name's Jeni Smith. I do 2 things. Well, I do lots of things, but mostly they all encompass anything to do with networking. I'm a bit obsessed with networking. So I run my own business, which is called NetKno, which is a networking agency, networking consultancy, based in the northeast of England in Durham. But I get to work with people all over the world, and that's predominantly either business people who are looking to network to grow their businesses, or academics who are looking to network for knowledge. And sometimes the 2 worlds collide, which is where my obsession area comes in. So the other thing that I do around networks and networking is I'm 3 years into my PhD, researching networks and how networking can help bridge that gap between those 2 worlds. So yeah, anything to do with networks.
Anything to do with networks. Well, I think the reason that you came onto my radar is because you have found this kind of niche in specialising in networking for academics, people in the research world. So what's that all about? Why is that such an interesting area?
It happened, as most niches do, totally by accident. And I think so. I've always for the last 20 years professionally, I've attended networking events either as a full-time networker, which is a job that I totally invented in Liverpool. So I didn't pay for like food or wine for about a year. That was nice. I ran a network in Cumbria, again, that was for business people. And then over here in the Northeast, ran a network for a number of years. So I've always been a networker in a professional context. But then when I started this business, I had links into academia. And it goes back to utilising the Durham University's MBA programme, where you can, as a business person, can take a real life project to the university. And then a student does some research into it, and it gives your business bit credibility, and it gives them a life project. And that's probably where it stems from originally. And then that relationship and that link into a university developed. And when I launched the business, helping people to network, which is usually through like workshops and training and things, the university asked me to come in and do some training for some of their students. And then over time, it went to some of their staff, and then other universities came in. And then that just kind of the snowball effect hit in. And then I found that networking barriers, although the barriers were very similar for business people and academics, because they're all humans, they're all people.
Yeah.
The way in which they network was very different, and their objectives for networking was very different. So I got to learn through working with academics about the world of academia. And then I just got sucked into it because it's just wonderful. And then went to the dark side a few years ago and to start my own PhD, which has allowed me a lot more insight. So now being able to come from, and as an insider, I guess, perspective to help understand and then deliver better training, not just to the academics, but also to business people who want to engage with academics and vice versa. So it's provided a lot of like empathy, I guess, and insight. So that's been really useful. So yeah, very by serendipitous interaction snowballed over the years.
Yeah, interesting. So you said there that academics, they're sort of, obviously, as you say, networking is networking, they're humans, but the reasons for networking are different.
Yeah, very different. Interesting. So networking for knowledge is absolutely, like, for business people and for academics, is the most valuable resource that it provides. However, business people's objectives is usually, almost survival, for want of a better phrase. Businesses, in order to keep being a business, they need to get clients, they need to sell their products and services. So often they network for those with that mindset. Whereas in academia, it's more networking in very niche. Often academics are encouraged and go to conferences to meet people in their own very specific sector, very specific field of expertise. Whereas business people often network a bit more broadly. So the problem with networking in such a niche way is they often accidentally create these echo chambers of knowledge for themselves. So if they're only, going out and speaking to people who know the things that they already know, they're not actually learning anything new. So a big kind of shift that I try and encourage academics is to build a bit more diverse knowledge networks. So looking to engage with people outside of their discipline, outside of their preferred methodology, outside of their, but in turn that equates to outside of their comfort zone, because then they encounter a lot of barriers, such as language. They use a lot of different acronyms and different, it could be someone in geography would benefit from speaking to someone in engineering, and there's actually a lot of transfer, and they can spark a lot of innovative ideas and collaborations potentially that create richer, more rigorous research. But that's scary. It's scary to do that. We're not naturally, we naturally are drawn to people similar to ourselves. And in academia, that's encouraged, and that's quite ingrained in the culture. So it takes a lot of courage to kind of step out of that and proactively look for people. And people haven't got time as well. They're busy. So there's a number of different barriers, but often that objective of networking to find the experts in your field to access knowledge, which is wonderful, but it actually often you could get so much more if you could network outside of that knowledge.
Yeah, and definitely with the drive there is now for more interdisciplinary collaboration.
Yeah,
as
absolutely.
well. So,
and beyond academia, obviously with impact rising up the agenda, having real world interactions and beyond academia, I'm finding that academics have to go out and network with people who aren't academics, which that's a whole other level of, because the power dynamics are different, the hierarchies are different, and especially people, who have built up success in their field of research, asking them to give up all that power by stepping outside of it, where citations and publications mean literally diddly squat. People outside of academia don't understand it. It doesn't mean anything. Asking them to do that's an even more vulnerable thing. So there's a lot of vulnerability there. There's a lot of fear of the unknown. There's a lot of research around the gaps that exist between the two, but it often comes back to the person, the human, and the barriers that they encounter.
Yeah, no, really interesting stuff, and certainly rings true with a lot of the experiences I've had of working in the research world. So you've said that you're basically a professional networker. What does that entail? Is that, like, you've said you do training and things like that? Do you also organize events?
No, I used to organise events. I spent lots of years doing that. So I'll consult on event design now, sometimes if and when it's needed, or if it's part of another project. I'll help design the experiences for delegates and things. But often, usually it's workshops, it's training, it's consultancy around creating networking strategies. I really love helping people be strategic with their networking activities. So helping them understand, and just identify what it is they want from that investment of time and resource and energy. What do they want in return? And then where they can position themselves in order to get that return on investment. Also helping people build confidence. I do some kind of a bit more longer term interventions, working with individuals to help them work out what their strategies are, but also what their personal barriers are and things, and helping them overcome those over a longer period. I love doing that. That's really cool. Large consultancy projects for larger businesses. There's a lot I found of universities and just large organizations who, since lockdown especially, and since the rise of hybrid remote working, have found a lot of disconnect internally. So there's a lot more institutions, organizations who are investing in internal networks. So I do quite a bit more, I've seen in the last couple of years, of that work, which again is really fascinating. It's really interesting.
It is. I can imagine, that's certainly, colleagues working together now who maybe never actually physically come together in the same space. Be quite a challenge.
But similarly, like how I said about academics and business people, kind of they're different. And even within universities, I find you've got your professional services and you've got the academics, and never the two shall mix, or they struggle. Again, it's language, timelines, these issues, these barriers, these differences that they have create these segregations often within an institution. So there's a lot of internal networks and a lot of training and workshops and stuff that can help to pull down those barriers and build the bridges inside as well as outside, which again, it's really fun.
No, definitely. You're speaking
the love language.
Yes, absolutely. So you've said this is something that you've done for a long time. What's been your journey into this work?
Oh, so I started out in the world of networking originally when I was an undergraduate in Liverpool at John Moores. I answered one of those random emails that was like, do you want some work experience in a creative sector? And I was like, I want some work experience in a creative sector. So I applied for that and ended up doing some voluntary work at this really small business at the time called Milky Tea that did CGI and animation, and worked directly with the owner of the business, which was great experience. As a business student, I was learning about a business by being in it. So that was really cool. But he took me along to my first ever networking event, and oh my word, was I terrified. No one prepared me for it, Sarah. Like I was literally, and I was really hungover at the time, which didn't help. But I was like thrown into this room full of what I deemed to be grown-ups in suits and given a name badge and just expected to know how to talk to them. So I hid in the toilets most of that event. It was genuinely scary. But John took me to another event like a few weeks later when I'd got over the trauma, and eventually plucked up the courage to go and speak to someone. And I still remember that person. His name was Livingston. He upcycled furniture, and he was more scared than I was. So the two of us just kind of like joked and chatted the rest of the night. And just from then on, I think I just fell in love with networking. And networking was a really big part of the culture in Liverpool. Like people it's part of what you do. You go out and you talk to people, and it just gave me access to all these different people. And originally, I'm from a tiny little village in Cumbria. So being able to suddenly go out and talk to these people who were doing all these different things, and they're all different ages and different sectors, and it was just amazing. So that's how I first got into networking. Fast forward a couple of years to when I graduated and invented my first job around networking, which was found that going to events, I'd speak to people who didn't have the time to go networking, so they'd complain about that, or they didn't like it, like genuinely hated it, the experience. And I also found that I was quite naturally, I really love connecting people. So I'd talk to someone and I'd be like, oh, you need to speak to this person and you need to speak to this person. But that's quite a hard thing to monetize. So I invented a job where I went networking full time. So I would take on a client, one from each industry, so there was no conflict. I would do a kind of corporate analysis of their business, so I understood what they did and who their target markets were. And then I just used to go out to like 5 or 6 events every day, Monday to Friday, and network and just talk to people. And it was, at the time, it was brilliant. I could not do that now. However, I have definitely yeah, that ship has sailed. But for that 1 year that I did, it was brilliant. And I got to speak to loads of people. And actually, that was the first time I went into a university. It was John Moores invited me back in and to give a talk to their students about what networking was. And that was the first kind of interaction originally of delivering a networking workshop. And so after a year of doing that, I was spent, and
I can
I
imagine.
learned so much, from going to all these events, that I flipped that. And when I moved back home to Cumbria, launched my second business, which was hosting events. So that's when I started organizing events, and having been a delegate, a very intense delegate to so many things, I kind of knew what worked and what didn't just through experience and observation. So then I started hosting events, which was business number 2 in networks. And I love that. And it was tough, to be honest. That was really hard because people didn't really network then in Carlisle. People knew each other, but they didn't go to events to get to know each other. So it was quite a slow burner, but managed to keep it going for, I think, 4 or 5 years. And then I met my husband, the love story that is, in Magaluf, of all the places. And he's a Northeast lad, he's from Durham. So I ended up moving over here. And then, fast forward a few years, and I got myself a job at a network that was already running here. I kind of approached them and said, please give me a job, let me run your network, which he eventually did. So I was the managing director of a network in the Northeast for about 2 or 3 years, called the Muscle Club, which was going before me, and it's still going now. It's a great network. And then took a few years out of networks and networking, and ended up working in the startup world and supporting tech startups with like fully funded support, which I loved. And part of my passion for networking and running a network is that you get to know all these different people and get to be part of their business journeys, which I absolutely adored. So being able to support them with fully funded all kinds of different things was great. But then when I went on maternity leave, I had my little girl, she's 5 now. When I went on maternity leave with her, I'm it's not the same for everyone, but for me, having a kid is like crazy, and like it totally my brain rewired, and I was like, and the idea of going back to a job to work for someone else full time, and then the cost of childcare on top, it just wasn't sustainable. It was
really hard.
It seemed ridiculous. Yeah. So I made the decision to leave my job while I was on maternity leave to start this business to help people to network. It's what I've always loved to do, and I wanted to get back to doing what I loved. And that part of that was reclaiming my own identity after having, a child, and doing the thing that I really loved to do. But I knew that I couldn't do full-time networking, and again, I knew I couldn't host networking events again. It's all consuming. So this felt like the perfect solution. However, the week that my husband took over the parental leave and the week that I started the business was the week that lockdown hit and everything shut. I know. So the idea of having
for a networking.
Exactly. Exactly. And by this point, it was too late. Like there was no going back. I'd left my job. Dave was on parental leave. We had a 6-month-old baby. The world went into lockdown. Originally, at the beginning, it was for 2 weeks.
Oh God, yeah, I remember that.
Do you remember? It'll just be 2 weeks.
It'd be like 2, and then it was 6 weeks, and then it was like whatever. Oh, yes.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, crazy. And I think if I'd known what was going to happen, if I'd known that it was going to be like 2 years before networking events could come back, there's no way that I would have obviously done that. However, it worked out well, and in that I was able to, I took my knowledge of supporting the business support ecosystem, I took my knowledge of that, and instead of trying to sell directly to people, because no one was buying anything, no one was going to networking events. I was able to change the business and work directly and sell into the support agencies, which allowed me to help people through that time at no cost to them, while still getting paid. So it meant that I had to change my business model, but actually in a wonderful way. And then now, obviously, as the world reopened, everyone was very anxious, and understandably, about networking. And there's a whole generation of young people that came out of the education system, that they spent their university time online, or there was people, so there was a lot of things that, I felt like I could really help with, which has been wonderful. So I'm able to do what I originally planned, but now with lots of other different things mixed into it. So
that is quite a journey. And just talking about doing multiple networking events a day does make me feel quite tired. Also, as somebody who's not very good with names and faces, it just all
names are often like people like feel really guilty about not remembering someone's name. It's like an etiquette thing, isn't it? I have got a name badge that I got with my like logo on it. And it's like it's a magnet one, so it doesn't wreck my clothes. So I wear that when I go networking, so that other people feel more comfortable. So if everyone did that, we'd all be fine.
I'm a big fan of name badges. I know not everybody likes them, but I'm like, no, let's all have name badges.
I'm the same.
But yeah, certainly. I mean, even within, it's interesting hearing you talk about the way that you work, and there are definitely people like you. So I'm thinking if anybody's listening, what you do is like almost you're like a very, could there be another? I'm not sure there could be another person done exactly what you do, but there are network coordinators and people in universities who do things like brokering those relationships between universities and businesses, or universities and charities or partner organization, when you're talking about impact and that sort of thing. So I think a lot of those skills are really relevant in lots of other jobs in this kind of world.
Yeah, there's a lot of people who naturally connect to others. They're just like natural connectors. They'll speak to someone and be like, oh, you need to speak to that person. And often they end up in job roles like that, where they can, they can use that ability. But sometimes people who are just, their job's got nothing to do with that, but they do that naturally for colleagues anyway, and they're invaluable when you find them people. But I think, and it can be something that can be taught. And I think often we think of networking as very transactional, in that we have to go and like, what can I get from this? Or for academics as well, often it can feel quite like it's quite a commercial activity, and they've got to go and sell themselves, or they've got to go and impress people. And, when I do workshops, so obviously I've been doing networking workshops for the past 4 or 5 years. I use Slido quite often as like an interactive tool, and I always ask at the beginning of the like little warm-up, I'll ask people, what's your biggest barrier, or what puts you off, or what don't you like about networking? And last year I analyzed all the results that I'd got, because it's all anonymous, and there was I think there was 3,000 responses, and I wanted to see if there was a difference between what business people's barriers were and what academics' barriers were. And basically, long story short, there was absolutely no difference whatsoever. And the barriers all came down to this sense of either I don't know what to do, so I don't know like how to act in these environments, and it's this fear of judgment, the feel of this vulnerability, this fear of social rejection we all have. I don't know what to say, so like I don't know how to engage in small talk. I don't know how to initiate a conversation on what to say to people. But the big one was this, I don't know enough to be there. So in academia especially, I think there's this sense of, unless I have all the answers, I shouldn't be in the room. And that's literally the opposite of what networking is for. Like, the reason to go networking is to learn. So the idea of not going because you don't know enough, it's like not going to school because I don't know the alphabet. Like, the reason you go to school is to learn the alphabet. The reason that we go networking is to learn, or to look for ways that we can add value to each other rather than taking. So there's there's a lot of people who naturally do go out and just are inquisitive, and they'll ask questions and they'll look for ways that they can connect people that are existing in their networks to new people or their colleagues. But I genuinely do think that anyone can switch. It's a mindset, switch that mindset onto adding value to others, being just open to learning and asking questions. But like you say, the universities especially, they have people there who are there to facilitate and does that bridge to help, to take them along to events or to connect them with the right people that they can then collaborate with or work with on, it could be co-creation, anything.
Yeah, no, it's really important. As you say, often kind of invisible, but a really important role, those people that help people to meet and connect and everything like that. Well, I'm sure that in the years you've been doing this, you've maybe got a couple of things you're proud of, maybe stories about things that have come or
the best one, the one
done.
that the one I always do is I connected two people together once and they went on to get married and have babies. So
connected them at a professional event, or
well,
as
I met
friends,
them both
or
professionally, but I was like, oh, you need to meet this woman, and knowing her. And then I just knew, and like they've got like 3 babies now, so I've created life basically. So that's pretty.
Maybe you've got an alternative career in like dating or something.
Honestly, I really think I could. I could totally do that. And in a more professional context, there's loads of things. There was a strategy I did for someone years ago, and I saw her recently, and she was like, "You do realize that." Because she's niched into a specific sector. She's really successful in it. And she said, you do realize that I'm only in this sector because you told me to. And I was like, what? She's like, when you did that strategy for me, it was a fully funded strategy. Again, I try and tap into a lot of funded opportunities that are out there to help, especially smaller or startup businesses. And she ended up going down that path. That was like, I feel like this is a good sector for you. And then now she's doing like international stuff. She's doing absolutely amazing. Wow. So often little things, or, you'll introduce 2 people that'll go on. The best ones are often, it's not like a direct, I bought this off this person. That's nice and that's lovely. It's more the collaborations that come, or the, in academia especially, you connect 2 people or you'll highlight something or tell them about an event and they go to it, and then that leads to collaborating on a paper or a research project, or they end up working together or bringing their 2 worlds together to create something even like better or something new. That like gives me so much joy, and I find it so exciting because you just don't know where these conversations lead to. So they're always wonderful, but often like people, they'll pop up like I say, like a year later or 6 months or sometimes 6 years later, and they're like, oh, remember you told me about this person? Well, we're now doing X, Y, and Z, and it's like, oh, that's amazing. And I get to feel like I'm part of that. Or anyone who I do a workshop for, and then they'll pop up on LinkedIn with a little message, and they'll be like, oh, Jenny, I want to let you know that I went to this networking event and this happened, and no one died and it was fine, and I actually really enjoyed it. And I'm like, get in, that's amazing. And you can tell that they're proud of themselves, and I'm really proud of them as well, especially that first step. So that's always really good as well.
Oh, really satisfying when you hear those stories that come back round, that it's made it, that what you've done's made a difference. It
changes lives. And I think again in academia especially, because the research that then people go on to do and the knowledge that they create, it genuinely it can change the world. It's amazing, absolutely blows my mind. So it is brilliant.
Oh, but I'm sure there are some things though that have been a little sticky along the way. So what have been big challenges for you?
Oh, that's a good question. I think, especially when I was first starting out in networking, like how to articulate that and how to express and communicate it in an effective way that was taken seriously. And as a person who's naturally quite excitable and like I'm quite full of energy, and my presentation style, like I like to use puppets and props, and it's fun, and but to try and get that try and get that across, but equally with credibility and giving credibility to networking as a whole that's seen as quite a fluffy thing. I think that was a bit of a struggle, especially at the beginning. Honestly, since starting the PhD, it's given me the words to be able to express and to identify phenomenon that I've witnessed and lived for 20 years, but I didn't know the words to explain them, if that makes
really
sense.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And knowing I know that there's all this research that backs up what I've seen and what I've witnessed and experienced. I'm able to now come with the receipts and be like, yeah, this is why, and this is what it's called, and here's the academic research to back it up. That has really empowered me a lot, and it's given me the words and the language and a lot more confidence, I think. So that's really, really helped me. It's a big learning development personal journey, I guess, over the last few years. But that's played a massive part in that. Absolutely.
Yeah. That's really interesting, especially when you've come at it. Basically, you've kind of learned on the job. And then now you find out that there's all this theory behind it. Yeah,
honestly, I read all the time, especially at the beginning, homophily is one of my favorite things, words, and it basically means that people who are similar are attracted. It's birds of a feather flock together. And I witnessed it and seen it, but I didn't know that there was a word or a phenomenon or a construct or all these things. So I would read a paper or something. I'd be like, that's what I've seen. And all these real life kind of experiences would run through my brain and they bring it to life. So I think I'm definitely someone who I think I would have struggled going straight through the education system traditionally, your undergrad, your master's, your PhD. I needed the lived kind of experience first, and then that's really helped me it's helped me to obviously find my passion and what I love, and then now getting the language and the words and the evidence to back it up. It's brilliant, absolutely brilliant.
Oh, that's really, really interesting. Well, so a question I do like to ask all of my guests is, if they had a magic wand, what would they change about the world that they work in?
Oh, the egos. Oh, the egos. They're so fragile, Sarah. I think, a big thing for me that it's coming out of my research as well. In order for people to work together and effectively network and build relationships with others and externally, they first need to have a good relationship with themselves. And I think there's a lot of the way that people, I think, and this is business and academia, this is both, they both look for a lot of external validation. Not everyone, obviously, but it happens quite a lot, and that really impacts what success looks like. So in business, success often is taking on investment, which is just debt. It's creating jobs, which is great, absolutely. But there's also other ways and means, supporting freelancers equally but it's not as seen as successful. There's lots of, those kind of things, winning awards, again, things like that. And in academia, it's obviously very much focused around publications and citations and getting grants. Again, all of which are absolutely important. Of course they are, they need to happen. But I think people who are comfortable in their own ability and who have, they know themselves, they don't feel the need to shout down others. They don't feel the need to, they don't need, they're there to support and lift up rather than try and scramble on top of others. And again, the power dynamics that it creates, sometimes the hierarchies, I would and get rid of them with my magic wand. That was my magic wand sound. Change them. That would be nice.
I can say again, that's making me think of people that I know who've been good leaders, and thinking of that, the way that they focused on supporting other people rather than pushing themselves forward. Really interesting stuff.
It is, it's fascinating.
Oh, well, I'm sure we could go on for ages and ages, and as we've already talked, I might get you back for another episode just to talk about maybe some of that advice around how people can do networking a bit better. But if I think looking at the time, if people would like to find out more about you or the work that you do, where's the best place to find you?
LinkedIn's dead easy. You know, you can easily find me on there. It's just Jeni Smith. Or the website has got loads of information. There's loads of free stuff as well, like downloads and videos and tips and stuff as well. I try and share all my knowledge. For some reason, then people want to pay me for it, which is wonderful. But there's loads of free stuff on there. So that's just netkno.co.uk. So netno.co.uk.
Great. I'll get the links for that. Put it in the show
Actually,
notes.
do you know what, Sarah? I'm totally lying to you. It's is it netno.com? I can't even remember my own. What's my email address? I'm gonna genuinely have to go and look. It's .co.uk. We're fine. We're .co.uk.
Excellent.
Netno.co.uk. Lovely. Double check.
Thanks so much. As I say, I'll make sure the one I've got in the show notes is the right one. So yes.
Who knows where it could go otherwise? Who knows? Yeah. Oh, thanks so much for having me, Sarah.
Oh, you're very welcome. Thanks for coming. Thanks for listening to Research Adjacent. If you're listening in a podcast app, please check you're subscribed and then use the links in the episode description to find full show notes and to follow the podcast on LinkedIn or Instagram. You can also find all the links and other episodes at www.researchadjacent.com. Research Adjacent is presented and produced by Sarah McCluskey, and the theme music is by Lemon Music Studios on Pixabay. And you, yes you, get a big gold star for listening right to the end. See you next time.